What we're going to do is we're going to talk about the process of shaping the way your organization is perceived on campus. We used the term, and a couple of times up front someone mentioned that we would be talking about branding and what it means to brand your organization. Essentially, branding is the process of intentionally shaping people's perceptions. Let me start by asking you a question. Somebody give me the name of a luxury brand. Lexus. Okay. Let's think even higher end than that.
Maybach.
Maybach. Very good. Okay. All right, that's a good one. Well, no, let's not do a car one. That's somebody else. Tiffany. Very good. Okay. So I'm not a Tiffany expert, I have to confess. But what if the sales and marketing directors of Tiffany got together with the person that decides what products they would introduce and said, we can introduce a ring or a piece of jewelry of some kind that we could sell for like $49 in Walmart. And we would make a killing. Here are the spreadsheets. Here's how much it would cost to make. And we could make an absolute killing on this. And they're coming to you. You're the person that makes the call. And they tell you that this would increase our bottom line by millions this year. What do you say? What's your answer? No. Who said that? Why?
Because it would kill your brand image.
It would.
Sell your stuff in Walmart.
They sell your stuff in Walmart. That's exactly right. Why would it kill your brand image?
Because it's a high-end brand and selling in Walmart.
Yeah.
It's counter to that.
Tiffany has spent millions trying to cultivate an image of what they're like. And here's why I share this. And in the context of what you're trying to do on campus, you're thinking, we're not selling jewelry. What are we talking about here? And you're not. That's absolutely right. And as you'll see when we get into this, one of the biggest pieces that we're going to talk about today is this idea of authenticity. So no, we're not selling a product. However, what I wanted you to see from the very beginning is this idea of branding, of thinking about how you're perceived, is not just a discussion about marketing. It's not just a discussion about sales. If you think through it well, it can actually help drive strategy. It can actually help drive strategy because the Tiffany guy is going to right away reject it. Now, if he's thinking, he might say, it's a great idea. We need to create a new brand that is wholly apart from Tiffany and launch it as a separate company if we think we can sell that product. Now, it might fall apart because it might have been depending on the Tiffany name, but that's a whole other story. The big picture, though, when you've thought well about your brand, when you've thought well about how it is you would like to be perceived and begin to try to shape everything you do with that in mind, it's about much more than marketing. So what are we doing here today? What we're not going to do is what we're going to talk about first. I'm not going to give you specific marketing tactics because every one of your contexts might be different. Every one of you might take what we talk about here and have a different direction you want to run with it. The second thing we're not going to talk about is we're not going to talk about a quick fix. There's no silver bullet. We've been talking about it since last night, that your message is countercultural. And your message is not a popular one on campus, and nothing we're going to talk about here today is something you're going to take back and apply tomorrow, and all of a sudden waves and droves of students are going to start showing up and go, we're with you on this, okay? But we do think it's really important to be strategic in how you go about communicating because everything you're trying to do is in the realm of communication. So what are we doing here? We're talking about communication. Everything that it is that you hope to accomplish is in the realm of communicating, persuading, challenging people to think, encouraging them to embrace a better way of life. Ultimately, at the end of the day, perhaps you would say, my goal is to change culture, right? And that is a tremendous goal. That's the kind of big picture thinking we need you to have. But in terms of what you're trying to accomplish with the students on campus, it's about communication. It's about connecting a message to an audience, and that is getting harder and harder to do every day. We live in an over-communicated culture. We are saturated, we are bombarded with messages. If you think about it, You wake up in the morning, you probably check your texts or check to see what email came in last night, right? You may log into some sort of social media site, you may not. Then you're going to shower. Your shower might be the only part of the day when you're not getting bombarded with messages, and they even sell radios that you can have, the waterproof radios that you can have in the shower. So you go out to your car if you're going to drive to class, right? Or you walk across campus, you're probably listening to some kind of media. All day long, it's hard for us to escape, and here's the problem. Everyone is competing for the attention of the students to whom you're talking, right? And when we start talking about Tiffany, it's a little easier because if you have that kind of money, and if you're inclined to spend money on luxury items, then you might want Tiffany stuff. So they're not trying to persuade you, right, about something that you don't want, if you're inclined to like Tiffany jewelry or whatever brand you'd want. The question for you becomes, in this oversaturated society, how will your message be heard? And we've talked about the idea that you don't have a popular message. So what we're going to do in the next few minutes, talk about two disciplines, okay? Talk about branding, first of all, which again is the process of intentionally shaping perceptions, how you'd like to be perceived. And we're going to talk a little bit about marketing. And marketing is simply once you've decided how you want to be perceived, once you've decided what message it is you want to communicate to the world, marketing is about what tactics you'll use. Again, I'm not going to recommend specific tactics because that would be way premature. I wouldn't have any idea yet without talking to you individually what might be a smart idea. So, as we think about this big picture of branding, our audiences, as we said, have been bombarded with messages. What impact does that have? First thing is that it makes them more cynical, more skeptical. Think about the political ads you've been seeing if you've watched any television in the last 2 weeks. Raise your hand if you have watched some television in the last 2 weeks. Maybe many of you haven't. Okay, not many. That's actually good. You are so fortunate because I've had the TV on some, and I tell you what, it is like 3 minutes of show, 6 minutes of Romney commercials, 6 minutes of Obama commercials, and then 3 minutes of show, and it's killing me. It's sucking the life out of me. So thankfully, I don't watch a lot of TV. But the more that we are bombarded with messages, the more skeptical we become. And I loved this morning when someone said in one of the seminars, I even forget who it was, said, we are judgmental. We are analytical. We judge everything we hear, right? That's the nature of who we are as humans. And I was thinking about this. Why would that be? Because when people used to have to be hunter-gatherers, right? They had to quickly evaluate, is that safe? Is that good for me? Should I go this way? Should I do that? What's safe? We're constantly evaluating, constantly judging. So when we begin trying to communicate a message, we've got to remember we're communicating to an audience that is skeptical, cynical, and perceptive. They begin to know very quickly, do I buy what these people are saying? What is my reaction? What is my gut feeling? The result is two imperatives. First of all, our message, this is one, sounds like two. Our message must be both strategic and authentic. It's got to be thoughtful. We have got to say, what is it going to take for us to do a really, really good job at communicating our message to an oversaturated audience? The great news is that you have resources at your disposal that are pretty amazing if you're working on a college campus. You probably have graphic designers that are around you that can help you shape your visual identity system, websites, whatever. You probably can find people that would be willing to help you, but do not settle for less than excellence. Because the minute you do, it's very likely that someone that's disinclined to believe your message already is going to write you off. Strategic, the second part when we talk about authenticity, it's if they're already disinclined not to hear your message and they hear something that they immediately are going to reject, you're done. My wife and I were talking about this a little bit the other day, and she said it's so funny when she hears an ad for a restaurant that says something like the best home-cooked food anywhere. She says, I don't listen to another word they say. Why? Because I didn't believe that first sentence, and now I'm done, right? And let's say that you're going to have an event of some kind, and you start to talk about what this event is going to be like, and you actually convince people to show up, and they show up and they don't find what you said to be true, you're done. You're done. That person will never pay attention to your message again. Authenticity is critically important. And so by the way here, even as we think about this idea of branding, before we even get to it, there's an underlying assumption that is critically important for you to understand. And that is, none of this matters if you're not going to deliver. At the end of the day, Mercedes-Benz can say that our cars are engineered like no other car in the world all day long as their cars are engineered well. But the minute they start producing lemons, that message falls flat, right? So as we start thinking about how you'd like your organization to be perceived on campus, then the question really, it has to start with, we do our job well. That's almost like a baseline expectation. The whatever offerings we decide to offer to campus are going to be excellent. First imperative is that our message must be strategic and authentic. The second is we must not think only about what we'd like to say, but how we'd like to be perceived, right? From your organization's perspective, your brand is a promise that you're making about the quality, about the product. In your case, it's not a product as much as it is thinking, as much as it is a way that you would like people to think about sexuality, the kind of life you would like them to experience. We can go on and on, but it's a promise that you're making to them. That's what your brand is from your perspective. However, from their perspective, their brand, your brand, is all of the perceptions they have about you. Let's go back to the Mercedes example one more time. Mercedes says we're engineered like no other car in the world. If your Uncle George had a Mercedes that fell apart and was in the shop every 2 weeks, and all you ever heard about him was about Mercedes was him complaining how bad his Mercedes was, how expensive it was, and how often it was in the shop, you're not going to buy into into that message, right? So Mercedes is making a promise about their brand, but to you, you're not buying it. Your perceptions. Now let's translate this into your language. You have an event on campus. Every perception a person has about that event, from the publicity, to how they feel when they walk in the door, to the kind of language that is used, to the people that are there, those things make up your brand, right? And that's why we need to think carefully about this. So while an organization must live up to its promise, what we've got to understand in branding is that, at least from the user's perspective, perception is reality. So what's really important? Here's an illustration of this idea that perception is reality. Last time I promised I'll mention cars. There are, other than Porsche, there are 5 German automakers. Ready? There's Opel. They took a circle and divided it into 2 parts. They used to sell Opel in America when I was a little boy. They don't sell it here anymore, but they still sell them in Europe. There's Mercedes-Benz. They've divided their circle into 3 parts. BMW has divided their circle into 4 parts. VW, if you look real carefully, has divided their circle into 5 parts. And then there's Audi that said, okay, we give up. We'll just do that, right? And the interesting thing about these logos is that from a designer's perspective, they're equally good. All 5 of those are equally professional design solutions. They're well executed. They're excellent. What really, really matters is not the logo. And a lot of people think branding equals logo. No. What really matters is what you think about when you see that logo. And what really matters for you is what people think about when they hear something about your organization. So you're going to go back to campus Monday, right? And somebody's going to say, tell me about what you did this weekend. And what comes out of your mouth next is going to shape the way they perceive your organization on campus. It's not just about a logo. It's about the way you talk about your organization, right? So, for instance, let's look at this for a second. I have no idea what Opel's brand is about. I couldn't tell you. Mercedes is about engineering. They've built their entire brand around engineering. You see that, you think engineering. BMW says the ultimate driving machine or something like that. Volkswagen, the Volkswagen brand is sort of in America built around the idea if you want a German engineered car that's really well built and you don't want to spend the money on a BMW or a Mercedes, get a Volkswagen, well built, right? Audi, no one knows what their brand is about. You'll see one commercial that's about engineering, one commercial that's about performance, one commercial. They're all over the map, and I would suggest that's why they don't sell as well in the United States as some of these other brands do. So the perception a person has about the organization is the brand of that person. Okay, we've talked about that. So the goal is to intentionally shape perceptions. Here's how we do that. There's 4 steps. The first step starts with mission, vision, and values. I've got a tree over here because this is the roots. This is the below ground, the below the surface sort of reality that's not evident to the outside world, but it will shape everything you do. Your mission, vision, values. This is, it gives the brand directions and answers questions like, who are you? What is it that you do? Why do you exist? Why should anyone care? Again, not explicit to the outside world necessarily, but it has to shape what comes next. And here's why. It may be that an organization trying to do some of the similar things you're trying to do, a different organization might decide, you know what? Our mission is to confront the messages that the world is sending about sexuality and stand up like Martin Luther King Jr. and say, this is wrong. Abortion is an injustice. We're going to be confrontational. Whereas another organization might say, you know what, our mission is to approach it differently. Our mission is to approach it through relationships, through building, through trying to reshape the conversation. It's a phrase that I love, that I've heard Caitlin use, right? So first step is define your mission, vision, and values and make sure that you start, even when you're thinking about the bigger picture of your brand, with who it is and why it is that you exist. Mission, vision. Second piece is what we'll call brand positioning. I'll call this the trunk of the tree because this is going to support everything that comes afterwards. This is where an organization plants its flag and says, this is why you should pay attention to us. This is why we are different. This is why our message matters, okay? And it answers, you got to answer questions like this when it comes to brand positioning. Who is your target audience? What is your group about? Why should I, on the outside, trust you? Here's a huge one, and we're going to talk about this more during the workshop portion of this. What is your brand personality like? And just to touch on that for a second, if you just think for a moment about websites, okay? Well-designed websites. I want you to imagine what a website for a kindergarten would look like, okay? Or aimed at kindergarten-age students. That's better. Got that? Now think about a funeral home. Okay, now think about a surfboard company or a skateboard park. Are you seeing these in your mind? The difference between Princeton University's website and MTV's website is pretty radical, right? As it should be, because each has a brand personality. And if you're going to be an organization that hopes to gain the attention of people on your campus, then you need to think through how are we going to define the personality, the way we would like our personality to be perceived, and define that. Because it's not enough to go to a graphic designer and say, design me a logo, design me a website. You need them to design you an effective website, an appropriate logo, right? That will shape people's perceptions of you along the lines of your brand positioning. What are your distinctives? Again, this is where you plant your flag. Your brand positioning is where you plant your flag and say, this is where we are different. Okay? Step 3, your brand identity. And this is very simple. Name, logo, color palette, consistent visual and verbal style, message matrix. I'll come back to that in a second. But I was doing some consulting with a group that does internationally. They do some fitness programs. And for 20-some years, they had been doing the same thing. And it had been only aimed at women. And they wanted to start to attract men. And the name was a very feminine-sounding name. And their colors were like light lavender and pink. You see the problem? So even the way you think about colors begins to shape how you're going to be perceived. A message matrix, we're not going to spend any more time on this than what I'm going to say about it right now, but you might want to do this at some point. It's an interesting exercise, and for those of you that might end up in a business at some point, some of this stuff could be very helpful. A message matrix is simply, you have on one side, here are the messages we want to communicate. And down this side, here are all the vehicles we have at our disposal, right? And then you connect them. This message, we're going to use the web to try to communicate. This message, we're going to have authors come to campus or speakers come to campus. This message, we're going to use Twitter every single day to keep pinging them with ideas. So what are the different communication vehicles you have? What are the different messages you have? And how are you going to connect the dots so that you can get the word out? Part of your brand identity. Fourth step. Oh, it could even include a sound. I was thinking about this. I actually just added this the other day. I'm not going to, I meant to download it and I forgot, but can you think in your head immediately the Intel Inside? Who can sing that for me? Come on, somebody sing that. Go for it. There it is. Very nice. Way to go. If I had prizes to get out, I'd give you. Here's the thing. I'm an Apple Macintosh. I'm a Mac guy. I'm an Apple guy. I've been an Apple guy all my life. I've never used a PC. I would be horrifically bad at doing anything on a PC because I've literally just never used one. But if you pried my Mac out of my cold dead fingers and said you must go buy a PC of some kind, and I walked into a store and there were two computers side by side, same price, same memory, same RAM, same speed, same everything, and one had Intel Inside and the other one didn't, I'm buying Intel Inside. Why? They got me. I don't know anything about them. I don't even know who the competitors are. AMD maybe? I don't know. And I couldn't tell you why Intel is better, if they even are. Maybe they're not. Technical people out there might be laughing at me. But one of the things that we see about branding is that on the positive side, once people sort of connect with a brand, it's very difficult, right, to go to the other side. And I love the Samsung commercials. They make me laugh about the Apple people standing in line when they've got presumably a better phone. What the Samsung people are forgetting is that the Apple people are standing in line to get apples, which I think Samsung would probably like. Okay, that's a huge digression. But brand identity could include a sound. Harley-Davidson has trademarked, right, their sound. Fourth step. Brand expressions, and here's where the rubber meets the road. Every possible interaction that you might have with your audience will help align their perceptions with your goals. Print collateral, if you run any kind of ads, websites and social media, both how they look and what they say. PowerPoint presentations, if you do those, or Prezi, which are even more fun. Environments and signage, internal communications, and then intangible things, including ambiance at a gathering. What it feels like when someone walks in, right? Everything you do will say something. Now, when people walk into a room, they're going to ask three questions. They're going to say, do I like these people? Do these people like me? And am I interested in continuing to associate with these folks, right? And a lot of those questions, a lot of the way that you welcome people to an event is an enormously important part of your brand. So that's branding. So when we start thinking about that, and we're going to unpack this in a minute, I'm going to walk you through how to define some of this stuff in the workshop part in just a second. But I do want to talk a little bit about marketing, and we're not going to talk about tactics, again, because every one of you might have a slightly different tactics you should pursue. But we are going to talk about a couple of things. First of all, I will say that your website and social media every day becomes more and more important for different reasons. The reason your website is critically important is because when someone wants to know more about you, you know that's what they're going to go look up. The minute they're curious about knowing anything more about your organization on campus, they're going to your website. And at that point, what they find there is going to make them more or less likely to take a next step with you. So it's not just a luxury, it's a necessity. And there are all sorts of good ways to build affordable websites, even if you don't have tremendous graphic design expertise or someone in your camp that can do that. I would actually recommend very strongly that you look up Wix.com, W-I-X.com. Tremendous way to build websites. I actually recently realized that, I've got a tremendous amount of business. I have not been trying to do much business for myself. I threw a Wix.com site up for myself, actually, and it took me about 3 hours. So if you go look at my site, that's how I got that built, and it's very well done. Social media. Let me say something about that. It seems to me that social media, particularly Twitter, until the day comes along that people are paying less attention to it, which might already start to be happening, but something will be next, right? is a tremendously powerful way for you to ping people with interesting thoughts. Now, you've got to get people to follow you, of course. That's part of the challenge. But it's just it's an outstanding tool, and that might be the kind of thing that someone on your team that is very shy and doesn't necessarily love to be a people person might jump into and say, boy, I could own this. And you could put some kind of system in place to continually get them, to keep them involved as a student and continue to communicate your message. Here are 6 non-negotiables, though, when you start evaluating a marketing thing, any kind of marketing initiative. The first is to be authentic. We've already talked about that, right? Be authentic. The minute you're not is the minute you fail. And there's no point in moving forward if it's not going to be authentic. The second is be excellent. That will surprise people, okay? And I know it's a campus ministry. I know it's a campus organization, not a ministry, and definitively. But I know that a big part of being on campus is the homemade look sort of thing. You will surprise people with excellence, and it will communicate something about you. Third, be surprising. You have the opportunity to catch people off guard. You've got a countercultural message. What is it that you could do that might rattle their cage a little bit and make them go, huh? I didn't expect that. It's a great opportunity. Fourth is be consistent. Here's why. You decide to engage in some sort of marketing activity. You decide to whatever it is, to do strategy X, and you do it once, and that's great. But too many people think if we put all our eggs into this basket and do X in marketing, then we're going to get these results. And then those results don't happen. And it's because of a fundamental misunderstanding of the goals, the reasonable goals of doing a marketing campaign. We'll come back to that in 1 second. So be consistent. Be strategic, another way of being thoughtful. And the sixth is be realistic. And when I say be realistic, that connects with be consistent. And I'll tell you why. Because the goal is this. The goal is to have the right kind of expectations. There are 4 realistic expectations that you can have. Number 1, it's to increase awareness. People cannot come to your meetings. People cannot interact with whatever events you have. You cannot begin to make an impact if people don't know you exist. Okay? It all starts with awareness. Both awareness that you exist first, and then awareness of what your message is. Secondly, a really doable goal is to influence perceptions. You say X. Someone that completely disagrees with X sees that or interacts with it. You want their reaction to be, I'm not sure I believe that, or maybe even I flat out don't believe that. But boy, that was thoughtful the way they said it. Or boy, that was thought-provoking. Maybe they don't even come out and admit it. Maybe that's too much of a leap for them, right? But you've stopped them in their tracks mentally, and they've thought about it. And at that moment, they may not be much closer to agreeing with whatever it is you're talking about. But their perceptions of you as an organization are going to be positive. And maybe they'd be willing to hear you again on it. Third one, you can realistically hope to invite them to action with any kind of marketing thing. And I would suggest that every marketing effort you have should invite them to some sort of action. And fourth, move them along this continuum that I'm going to show you right now. Any of you that have had sort of marketing 101, you will recognize this. But we want them to go from awareness. Hey, you know what? I'm aware that there's a company called Nike that makes shoes. Next step in the process, knowledge. You know, they make the kind of running shoes that would be really good for me because I pronate, or whatever it is for runner. I'm not a runner. I'm more of a basketball player. Credibility. I bought a pair of Nike shoes, and I really think I buy the message that they fit my feet well. Acceptance. I think I'm going to buy them from now on. Preference. I'm going to walk right by the Adidas that are $5 less without ever looking at the Adidas because I prefer them. And then demand. I'm going to be telling other people about them. What does this look like in your context? So let's go backwards. Awareness. I'm aware that there's a group called Love and Fidelity Network, or probably you've got a better name than that on campus. I've heard Hooked Up, or no, I'm sorry, Off the Hook. And what are some other names of your groups? Anscombe Society. Okay, that's mysterious, so it's good. Who knows what the heck that is until you've unpacked it a little bit. That's fine. I mean, that's absolutely fine. And Off the Hook is a really engaging one too. I'm aware that these organizations exist. Step 2, I think I know what they're about. I don't buy it. I don't agree with it, but I know what they're about. Step 3, I still don't buy it. I still don't buy it, but you know what? They make me think. Or they're really funny. Or they really bring top-notch people to campus, or whatever it is, And, by the way, some of the people I know that believe the stuff they believe are pretty impressive to me. The way they can defend what it is they believe. Acceptance. Gosh, maybe I do, or am starting to wrestle with it. And this is how we want to move people along, how we'll hope that they'll move through the process. Preference. Yeah, I buy it. I'm on board. And demand. We're not selling a product, right? But now I'm going to start helping persuade my friends because this is life-changing stuff. This is culture-changing stuff. It's more than life-changing stuff. Okay, last thought, and then we're going to get into the workshop portion of it. If you want your people to bleed, you've got to hemorrhage. I did not make that up. A professor did. And big picture here, the idea is that when we start thinking about this idea of how we want to shape perceptions of our organization, we've got to be very intentional about it, right? And it starts with, and we're going to talk about this in the workshop in just a minute, and we're doing pretty well on time, so I'm encouraged by that. It starts with even something as simple as what I'll call an elevator speech. That could be part of your brand identity. How is it that you explain what you do when you have 20 seconds to do it? In a way that's compelling. Because if I asked you what it is you want to do, if I ask why you exist, you might tell me we exist to change culture. We exist because we believe that people are settling for less in the area of sexuality than they could, right? And we believe that many of the things that are happening in culture around in the whole area of sexuality are not just problems, they're social injustices. I have a very good friend who's on the board of directors of Love and Fidelity Network named Matt Bennett. I think he's on the board. Is he on the board? Yes, he's on the board. And Matt's a great friend, and he talks about this all the time, that we sell short how big a problem this is, that it is a social injustice. And so we might talk about the idea that we exist because we want to change culture, but that's not going to make a lot of sense to the freshmen we're riding up the elevator with when we get back to campus Monday morning. So why does this group exist that you went to this conference on? Well, we want to change culture. How? Because we talked about sex. What? And the conversation starts to derail from there. And so you want to think, even in the way you talk about why you exist, and when this idea, if you want your people to bleed, you've got to hemorrhage, I would suggest that your leadership should solidify how it is you talk about yourselves in 15 seconds and then maybe in a minute. So when you've given your 15-second spiel, it's so compelling, it's so interesting that the freshman that's never heard of it, that's riding up the elevator with you, is not just sprinting the other direction when the elevator doors open, but says, well, wait, what does that mean? Tell me about that. And then you've got the next thing, and you've thought about it, because that's an enormous part of your brand. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Now we're going to work. I am going to, I'm going to show you one quick example of a project that I had the privilege to work on, and it's one that I chose intentionally because it's a group with somewhat of a countercultural message. Now, I don't know in this room how many of you will think it's countercultural, at least for you, but it is countercultural, and it's a rebrand project I did for a church, a big church in Northern Virginia. And it's a Christian church, and I realize that not everyone in here comes from the same faith perspective. There are people that would say they're Christians and people from other religions, and that's completely fine. But if you think about it, the Christian message at its core is that Jesus Christ is the only way to God, right? And that is a countercultural message in the United States of America. We live in a pluralistic society where you're allowed to believe and have the freedom to believe whatever it is you want to believe, and that's fantastic. However, to say Jesus is the only way to God, and that's what he said. It's not just what the church says, it's what he himself said, right? So either it's true or false. And so when a church is claiming that is a countercultural message. So there's a big church in Northern Virginia that likes to say they take important things seriously, but they don't take themselves too seriously. And what that means, and there's worship like most churches have, and then there's a pretty thoughtful message that's given every week. But they do two things for people that maybe have never come to church before. One is every single week there's a song, a pop song that's played in church that relates to the message that you would be hearing on the radio. And usually it's tied in and say, okay, this is a song you heard this week or last week or whenever on the radio. And the second thing they do is they use humor all the time. In fact, they're known as a funny church. They send out postcards that are funny. Well, they needed to introduce a new logo. So this is what I came up with. We started working with them on some things and we thought it would be fun. And so let's just go through this real quick because I proposed actually that it could be lots of different colors. We could do lots of different fun things with it and actually just make it fun. So this was part of how we proposed it. And we said, one of the things we said is we're going to introduce this thing by starting to have it show up on cars and start to have it show up all over Northern Virginia before we introduce it. We're going to put this in all over creation without telling anyone what it was. And at first the pastor was like, what are you talking about? It's just an inn. And so literally signs up over 66, big banners, guerrilla marketing all over the place. We got signs in the median strips, hundreds of them, with just the N, with nothing else, okay? And people started talking about it. In fact, there's a website called Fairfax Underground where people just talk about things that are happening in Fairfax County, and some people started wondering what this is. End signs around town. Has anyone noticed these white signs around town? What are they for? And it gets really ugly. Can you see right here? Third post. The N is for nigger. And I don't even like saying the word out loud. Okay? And people started, let me see if I can, I can't scroll down to that one. Actually, you know what? Let me do it this way. All right, there we go. So, oops, that would need to be over here, wouldn't it? All right, give me 1 second. All right, so there's that, and then immediately, we hadn't seen this. So this was happening without the church even knowing this was happening. So it's true, I heard the same thing from a friend of mine who lives near us, so someone actually agreed with that nonsense, right? And so, you've got to be kidding me, those signs need to come down. Yeah, that's effed up. I almost don't even believe that. Someone posted a pic. I've seen them around, but I have a hard time believing that. That's so not true and really messed up to say. I'll get a pic tomorrow on my way to work. I first noticed them, blah, blah, blah. I love this one. I figured there was some kind of restaurant promotion or something. Getting the logo on people's heads. It's not a mean inn by any means. It's a peaceful inn, right? So I'm telling you, hundreds of posts before we even realized this was all going on. And when the police called and said, this doesn't really stand for something racial, does it? And we're like, oh my goodness, no, this doesn't stand for something racial. So, all right. So anyway, that went on and on and on. We let it go, actually, in a way that was fun. Whoa, wait a second. That's not where I want to go. So eventually we posted a website, and we said, we put up a website saying, and we put up signs everywhere, whatisthatn.com. We still weren't giving it away. And it says, so, I don't know if you can read it from there, and no, the inn is not for vitamin water, it's not a subdivision being built in the median of either Route 15 or Stone Road. It's not a candy bar, it's not a hair gel, on and on, because these are all things people suggested. Hair gel, Ralph Nader, subdivision, ice cream shop, haircut place. Hundreds of people, they were curious. So then, we ran this. Well, here we go. Wait a second. Why won't that play? There we go.
Starbucks and buy something. The end is there. Miss Proctor says, leave me alone. Sir, the end is near. The end, okay? You're going to invite the end over for dinner, and it's going to insist on bringing something because it's courteous and well-mannered. The end is this close. The only thing Chuck Norris fears is the end. In fact, it is believed that the end comes from the N in Norris. N equals 6.3752. Oprah wants to give the N to every member of her audience. The N is here, it's there, it's everywhere, and just...
All right, we can stop. But that started to get a lot of publicity, and people that got a tremendous amount of traffic. Oops. So let me close this. I'll show you 3 more things, and then we'll get to it. So then we sent out postcards, right? Those are my kids, by the way. Here's the first one, Happy Easter. The N branded on the side of a cow. The second one shaved in the back of a guy's head. Third one tattooed on a guy's arm. You probably can't see it. It's right there. What's the point? Why do I show you all this? It's because the goal was to get people's attention, to surprise them, to catch them off guard, to have people thinking, wait, what is this? And why? Here's the biggest question. Why? And the answer is not that they would see this postcard or see that video and go, I'm going to go to church, and it didn't happen. And if the leaders of the church had expected that to happen, they would have been disappointed. The goal was to raise visibility, to raise perceptions, to make people connect the dots. This and, oh yeah, that's that New Life Church that always sends out the funny postcard. I get it. Why? So people would come to church next week? No. So people would think the next time I am interested in going to church, I'm more inclined to go there. So people would think to themselves, gosh, if I have a kid and I want them to go to Sunday school, I haven't been to church in years, where am I going to go? Right? Or I'm getting married, or something's happened. Somebody in my family is sick. And there's tons of stories, even about the postcards they send out over and over and over, at 3 or 4 a year, that are just funny. Tons of stories about people having jammed a postcard in their drawer, found out that they're getting cancer, or they have cancer, and going, where's that card? And they show up at the church 3 years later after the card was sent. It had been in their junk drawer that we all have right in our kitchen, or whatever. But when we start thinking about what you're doing on campus, there are so many parallels, right? There are more parallels to what a church might do than to what a business might do, because we're trying to influence perceptions. We're trying to shape the way people see us so that they might be more inclined to come to our meeting because we've persuaded them that we're thoughtful, or interesting, or funny, or off the wall. Somehow we've caught them off guard. Okay? All right. So now let's get into the second part. Get your pens out. Ready? We launch this, and it's going to look... That is not it. There it is. Okay. All right. So part 2 of this thing. I want you to write down thoughts. Hope you have a pen out and some paper. Here are some questions. First one. What messages or organizations are competing with your voice on campus? Write down a couple of thoughts and then let's share them out loud. This is one you could spend more time back on campus, and maybe it's mildly self-explanatory. If you are thinking about how to brand an organization, though, audience analysis is critically important. Thinking carefully about who your audience is and what other people are saying. Who wants to share some thoughts? Nope. Yeah, go ahead. Planned Parenthood. Good one. You should know what they're saying. You should know what their stuff looks like. Who else? What's that? Absolutely. Yep. Very good. Yep.
Most fraternities.
Most fraternities. Yep.
Feminism is for everyone.
Feminism. Okay, good. Yeah. Do you, man, oh my gosh. Can you hear how many different directions your opposition is coming from? It's not just one direction. It's a pretty remarkable kind of range of people that you've talked about. Okay? All right. Next. Here's a hard one. Yeah.
I think something else to make notice of is that it's not just the people that are opposed to us, but also just in communication. Like there's lots of other clubs on campus besides these opposing
That's enormously important. Thank you for saying that. That's a great perspective, because Amazon. The store down the street isn't just competing with the store next door anymore. It's competing with Amazon.com too, right? I mean, competition comes from all sorts of different directions. The fact that they could stay home and put their feet up and play Xbox or something. Very good. Very good. Here's maybe the hardest question I'll have to ask you. This is where you need some self-introspection, okay? And honesty. How is your group perceived right now on campus? Maybe no one knows you, and if that's the case, in some ways you're in great shape. It's better to have no one know you than to have people perceive you badly, although a bad brand can be overcome. Honda and Hyundai are two examples in the car industry.
One of our problems currently at Harvard has been everyone knows us because the student paper has taken a specific interest in our group. And so we just underwent a rebranding campaign ourselves from what we thought was a wonderful organization named True Love Revolution to joining the Anscombe Society. I also work with HCFA, which is Matt Dennis.
Yes.
On campus for their branding. So we're fighting that battle at the current time, and it's difficult to overcome that perception, especially when they make baseless claims and post retractions the next day on purpose.
It is.
It's wonderful.
You're getting under somebody's skin, though.
Which means we're doing something right.
Yes, I agree. Who else would like to share things about the way they're perceived on campus?
So I'm a principal, and for my first 3 years, I was never interested in this kind of stuff. And so I think the general way that most people look at Anscombe Society is like, it's not as antagonistic as it sounds like it is at Harvard, but it was more like, it's not like, oh, there's those random other, random weird people that are over there, but it's more like a live and let live. And then the other thing is, and not even for people that don't think it's weird, it's like some people are like, oh, that's just not targeted at my demographic. It's like almost like, this isn't really a good example, but like almost like a white student and like the black student union. It's just like this isn't targeted towards people like me.
Interesting. Okay. Hopefully you're writing down some thoughts about the way you think your group is perceived by outsiders. If you don't know, you might want to ask some people who definitely aren't part of your group when you get back to campus.
Typically, the people that have gotten involved in my group are just perceived as a bunch of lonely, freshman, sophomore girls who just need support network because they can't effectively socialize anywhere else.
Right.
Why should we care? They obviously need some help.
And of course, it's easy to throw darts at the messenger, right? I mean, ad hominem attacks as opposed to dealing with the issue at hand. But I think that similar thing might happen in a lot of contexts. When a group is on campus with a message that I don't like because I really want to be out there in the hookup culture, right? What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to put down that group. That's going to be my gut reaction. Of course, it's not very intelligent, but it's what happens all of the time when people don't want to wrestle with the issues. Are there perceptions that might need to be overcome? That'll be self-evident by the way you answered the last question. Here's a really good one to ask, okay? Really good one. Define how it is you'd like to be perceived. And I'm going to unpack that a little bit more in just a minute. But define how it is you'd like to be perceived, and I'll come back to that. All right, let's move forward. So, when we start talking about mission, vision, values, how would you tell someone why you exist in 15 seconds? Write that down right now. How would you tell someone why your group exists on campus? And I'd like to hear some answers if you have the courage to say it out loud. All right, who's willing to share?
My group is Generation Life. Our mission is to spread a culture of life through education, or building up a culture of life that respects the dignity of the human person from conception all the way to natural death. We do this by giving thoughts and stories and stories.
Good. You thought about this some. Good. Who else? What about Love and Fidelity Network group? Or no, you go ahead first. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm with Seminarians for Life, co-live group over at the seminary here in town.
Awesome.
We exist to defend life as God's special creation from conception to naturalization.
Good. Good. So a couple pro-life organizations back to back. I like it. I like it. Yes.
Oh, sorry, it's also pro-life, if you want.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so, slightly different angle to, just kind of open the discussion, show that abortion is not necessarily not necessarily liberating, also not compartmentalized, and that, it has, other consequences beyond, abortion itself. We just want to undermine sort of that people have right to life and that, spreads into other unexpected areas.
Yeah, that's good. Someone just pointed me recently to the 180 video. Have you guys seen the 180 video on YouTube? You've got to look it up because it's fantastic. It's a guy that starts out by talking about the Holocaust and interviewing people around America. Or I don't know where he was interviewing people, but who is Adolf Hitler? And the stunning number of people that don't even know, right? And then getting people, obviously, they would stand up against the Holocaust if they had been in that situation, right? And then turning that discussion to abortion. And it's fascinating. It's really good. Go to YouTube and look up 180. You'll find it. Very interesting. But this isn't. Oh, anybody from one of the Love and Fidelity Network groups want to take a shot at your 15-second speech? What would you say? Somebody said what? So. What'd you do this week? And I went to a conference. Conference for what? For this organization I'm involved with on campus. Yeah, what's it called? You give them the name. What is that about? What would you say? I'll put you on the spot.
I would say for promoting a healthy view of marriage and sexuality at our school.
Good. Okay. And what I would say, did everybody hear that? Promoting a healthy view of love and sexuality, marriage and sexuality at our school. I think that's good. That's a really good start. And the thing I would challenge you to continue to pursue is how, if you put yourself in the hearer's mindset, how are they going to react to that? And is there a way even it might become a little bit more compelling to reshape the conversation about what really great sex is like? About or something. Okay, that's too far over the edge. So reject that. Okay, I'm not recommending that. Cut the tape, whatever. But something along those lines. I mean, I love the idea of to engage our campus because people are settling for less when it comes to sex and relationships. I personally wholeheartedly believe in the part of this mission that's talking about the importance of marriage. I'm the most happily married person you guys know. I'm a believer. But here's the deal. A lot of students aren't thinking about marriage right now. So why not position it in terms of sex and relationships, right? You want great relationships? You want a great relationship right now? Well, what is it your long-term goal is? Oh, it's to be happily married? How do you get from point A to point B? Ooh, interesting. Now we start to engage the mind. If you start talking about, I'm thinking about marriage more right now. Well, when I was in college, that's the last thing I'm thinking. I'm not interested in talking about marriage right now, even though I would have liked down the road to have been happily married and a good dad, all that jazz. All right, let's move on. So we don't have time for you to work on this right now, but I really think that you ought to talk with your other leaders in your organization to say, what is our 15-second elevator speech? How can we phrase this in a way that's compelling, that makes someone want to go, tell me more? That's the goal. Well, your 15-second elevator speech should make them want to go, well, that's interesting. What do you mean by that? Okay, so maybe it's not explicit. Maybe it's a little mysterious and draws them in. And then what's the follow-up to that? And you all should be consistent with, really, really, really consistent with that. So your leaders are saying the same thing. So the people that are getting involved will be hearing that over and over and over. If you want them to bleed, you've got a hemorrhage, right? They need to hear it over and over and over, the same idea, so they start repeating that. So that when you're not there, the brand is still going in the direction you would hope it would go. Brand positioning, I'm going to go through these kind of quickly. Audience analysis is mission critical for most organizations. Strangely, perhaps slightly less mission critical for you because your audiences are so similar. They're college students, right? And it's worth thinking about. What does your group do? That gets back to mission vision. What are your distinctives? How really are you different? You need to be able to answer that question. And here's what I want you to do right now. what would you like your brand personality to be like? Now, this is the way I would ask a client if I were meeting with them. And I've done this with some pretty big companies and some mid-sized companies and small companies, and I do the same thing, and it's a great exercise. If your organization were a person, how would you like that person to be described? Describe it as if it were a person. Is it cool, hip, funny, serious, studious, intelligent, judgmental? Hope not. Thought-provoking? And a lot of the ones I just said are good, but ultimately you're going to want to narrow that down to 3 to 5 of the strongest ones. And it becomes really important because then the things you create next, when we get to the brand expressions, right? The brand identity really, but then brand identity, brand expressions, the things you create should reflect these personality traits. So write down some of the things that you think are some of your key personality traits that you would like to be true of your brand. Okay, who wants to share some of the thoughts they've had? Let's just shoot these out like popcorn quickly. Let's go. Fun? Kind, good. Friendly.
Reasoned, tempered, bold, engaging.
Reasoned, tempered, bold, engaging. I like it. And where you need to unpack that a little bit is, what is the practical implication of the word bold? What does that look like? It's a good one. It's a really good one. But again, it gets back to, I think we mentioned this earlier, that immediately asks the question, are we bold in a confrontational way? Are we bold in a getting our message out there way? What does bold mean? But good. What else? Other thoughts? Informative. Excellent. Informed.
And passionate.
Informed might not even be a personality trait. That might be mission critical for you. You might all fail if you don't come across as, hey, we know what we're talking about. We have some compelling thought. But that also could be a personality trait. That's really good. What else did you say? Passionate?
Compared to bold, passionate. Passionate about what we have and we'd like to share with you.
Good. Some of the notes I took earlier from when Dr. George, I'll come back to these right after this presentation. Actually, let me do that right this second. All right, spit out a couple more.
Sincere and intellectually challenging.
Sincere and what?
Intellectually challenging.
Intellectually challenging. So, great. That's fantastic. I'm on board. So what does that mean? And you don't need to answer it as much as think about, okay, so this is where branding leads to strategy, right? Because you've got to ask the question, if we're intellectually challenging, how are we going to challenge people intellectually? In what context is that going to occur? So really, if that becomes one of the personality traits of your organization, that we want to be intellectually challenging, now you've got to start to begin to think about what you're going to do on campus in light of that. And that might look different than some other groups who don't take that as one of their personality traits, right? The kind of events you would want to have. Earlier today when Dr. George says, we must learn to make the arguments, right, based on philosophical principles, and we must do business in the currency of the campus environment intellectually. And then Dr. Budzaszewski, I think, pretty close, when he gave those 7 things: speak from a position of strength, be maximalist, speak from the language of common sense, distinguish real questions from smoke screens. That's a little bit different. But all of these things are about authenticity, how we engage people on a personal level. I think all of these things that we're talking about this morning should also apply to how we engage corporately, right? I think that becomes really important. All right, any others you want to share? Or let me ask it differently. A few others.
Thoughtful, optimistic, classy.
Say that again.
Thoughtful, optimistic, classy.
Thoughtful, optimistic. That's great. And classy. Yeah, they don't expect excellence. But optimistic, my fear for every one of your groups is that if you don't think about this stuff carefully, you will be perceived as judgmental. You will be perceived as down on sex. You will be perceived as no fun. You will be perceived as stick in the mud. You will be perceived. And the optimistic thing gets at the opposite of that, right? There's something better. You guys are settling. You're settling. Don't settle. Don't settle. I'm not saying that to you. That's what you're thinking. That's what we're saying to the campus, right? That's at the core of our message, is something optimistic. I love that. Others? Tenacious. You're going to have to be. I like it. I like it. Joyful. Hope so. Refreshing. I hope so. I hope so. Good. Good. Now, you can write down a bunch of these. You can argue about them yourselves. You can use 20 if you want, but it starts to get overwhelming. What you want to do is when you narrow it to a handful of them, and there's no magic number. It can be 8 if you want. It's a good number. But you want to say, okay, so what does this mean for what we're going to do next? What does this mean about the ad we're going to run in the paper that we've raised money for? Or what does this mean about whether we have a weekly meeting at all? Or whether people might wonder, what do they do at those weekly meetings? Having a weekly meeting about this seems weird. Because it might seem weird. And you've got to take a hard look at the stuff you do from the perspective of an outsider and say, would doing X, Y, or Z look weird, and why? And how? And if it's important to have a weekly meeting, how do we offset that? Right? And maybe each one's a speaker. All right. So, didn't we just do this one? We just did this one. It's brand personnel. Oh, here's a really fun one. Okay. Sorry. That's why I got there. Really quickly, I'm going to give you 8 word pairs. They are not opposites. You are not allowed to think and evaluate these. You're not allowed to really drill down on these. Write down an answer. Would you like the personality of your organization to be seen as elegant or bold? There's the first word pair. Write it down. Elegant or bold? Just pick one. Gut reaction. Got it? Next, warm or high tech? Got it? Next, relational or conceptual? Ooh, that's a tough one for you guys. Could go either way on that one. Aggressive or subtle? That's huge. Aggressive or subtle? Natural or technical? Maybe doesn't apply quite as much. Maybe you can think of ways it can. Lighthearted or serious? Can I tell you, people, that I can imagine a world in which you have a campus organization that's either one. We're dealing with some serious stuff, but you can set a tone that, yeah, we're serious, thoughtful people. Or you know what? There's a side of life, the joyful side of sexuality and relationships that this stuff, we got it all wrong, and maybe it's harder to imagine it being lighthearted. Modern or traditional? That's more stylistic and what things will look like that you create. Common or exclusive? And why? It's a really good one to think about. Common or exclusive, and why would it be one of those? Now here's the thing. If you just went to a graphic designer, some really talented student, and said, would you help us think through what all of our stuff looks like? They'd say, sure. And really, to be honest with you, a 19-year-old, very talented designer can do the same stuff that a really talented 32-year-old designer can do. Okay? But a 32-year-old designer will have a lot more experience about asking the right kind of questions. These kind of questions are what you need to give that 19-year-old designer to say, this is the personality we're after. Okay? Because someone that's going to design something modern versus traditional, you can already picture the difference, right? And as you start to nail down some of these personality, as you start to define your personality, it will shape what things look like. All right, brand identity. And we need to fly through this part. If you look back at the thoughts that you have about your mission, brand positioning, then I want you to right now evaluate what you've written in light of the personality that you've just defined. Your group's name. Does it reflect the personality that you just said you'd like it? If it does, great. If it doesn't, you may want to rethink either the personality traits, because you might have had something a little off, or you might want to rethink the name. Maybe it doesn't fit. Logo. The logo's not mission critical. Half the Fortune 500 companies use thoughtfully done text logos, right? So it's not I design logos, I love logos, but visual style. Are you going to look more like a skateboard company? You're going to look more like a university? Do you want to be seen as thoughtful and intelligent and sort of highbrow, high-minded, or do you want to be seen as kind of relatable and, messaging, tone, style, etc.?